It's Monday, March 2nd, 2015. The markets in New York are open, and the big number this morning, $7 trillion. A lot of zeros there. Forbes opening the checkbooks of the world's richest today, releasing their list of the world's billionaires, from tech to real estate to food to fashion. The list setting records with more than 1,800 men and women worth more than $7 trillion and a little bit of change. Hey everyone, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York. So who made the list? Who saw their net worth drop? I want to bring in the details. Rick Newman has that from Yahoo Finance. Rick, let's break down this list there. Number 5, Larry Ellison, net worth $54.3 billion. How do you make that money?
He made that money in the computer business. His company is Oracle. It's a database company. He's been a terrific innovator in tech for a long time. He's sort of the old guard in Silicon Valley at this point, and we saw some other sort of familiar names on this list as well.
Okay. Well, speaking of another person, the Spanish fashion mogul, Amancio Ortega, coming in at number 4. What do we know about Ortega?
Zara, the fast fashion retailer. I mean, they have changed the way people buy clothes, honestly. This is cheap clothing that's very hip and trendy. I think the innovation there is they figured out ways to get the clothes into their stores about a minute after they show up on the runway, and they're cheap versions. People can afford them. You can buy these clothes and not really worry if you wear them next season because they're so cheap, and that has really changed retail. It's given companies like the Gap and other fashion retailers a difficult time. They've changed the industry.
Interesting. Okay, so number 3 on the list, everyone knows this guy, Warren Buffett. He's worth more than $72 billion, but it's a new ranking for him this year, right?
Warren Buffett just keeps cranking it out. Berkshire Hathaway is going strong. That's his company. It's a conglomeration of companies. More ordinary people can't even buy the stock. A single share is $200,000 or so. But Warren Buffett, he is just the titan of American businessmen, and he's 84 years old and he's not slowing down. You know, there's something to feel good about here, Dan. Warren Buffett gives a lot to charity. He's one of the wealthy people who has pledged to give away over half of his wealth. So, you know, if you feel left out because you're not making that kind of money, at least feel like somebody's putting it to good use.
It's going to good use. There's a consolation prize for it. Coming in at number 2, there, a Mexican, Carlos Slim Helu, who's worth $77 billion. And he should not be a stranger to us, correct?
It's another familiar name. He made his money in the telecom business in Mexico. He basically dominates telecom in Mexico, the phone companies, including mobile companies there. He's been buying up some other carriers. And last year he bought a big stake in the New York Times. So he is now the biggest shareholder in the New York Times. And so far he seems to be a fairly benevolent shareholder. He's not trying to shake up the company. He's just trying to kind of be a part of, a storied journalism tradition there. Interesting.
All right, and so topping the list this year, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, $79 billion. How long has he held this title now?
Oh, boy, years and years. I mean, Gates obviously made his fortune starting in the 1980s with Microsoft. Microsoft had a good year. That's obviously where a lot of his wealth is tied up, although I think he's been reducing the amount of shares he owns. But Microsoft shares were up 14% over the last year or so, so obviously good for Bill Gates. He's another one. He's also giving away a lot of money. He gave away several $1 billion in 2014. Obviously, there's a lot more where that came from, and of course, he's chairman of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, focused on doing a lot of work in Africa, focused on education, other things like that. So again, putting his wealth to good use.
All right, so that's the top of the list there. But what about the other billionaires that are listed on this list? Those that are 46, under the age of 40 years old.
Yeah. Can you say Silicon Valley? Of course you can. I mean, this is the trend, at least. There is something we're familiar with, which is these companies that go from 0 to $1 billion seemingly overnight. That is still happening. So some of the newcomers we're seeing are the founders of Uber, the ride-sharing service. The founder of Snapchat is now on the list as a billionaire. That's Evan Spiegel. And Mark Zuckerberg, of course, he's only, I think, 30 years old, but he's now the 16th richest person in the world, of course, founder and CEO of Facebook. And these are the sort of Warren Buffetts of the future, I guess you might say.
Okay, so who got kicked off the list this year?
A bunch of Russians. I think they suffered the most on account of two or three things going on in Russia. The ruble has crashed, so if your holdings are in rubles, you just lost a lot of wealth just by being in Russia. And also, the fall in oil price is a big problem for Russia. That economy obviously still faces a lot of trouble, and we could see some turmoil in Russia in 2015 that we haven't seen so far. When you hear that the oligarchs are losing money, that means people are getting very restless over there.
All right, interesting list indeed. Unfortunately, Rick, neither you nor I are on that list. Maybe someday. We'll
Maybe
have to
next
wait.
year, Dan.
Maybe it's just something to shoot for. Rick Newman from Yahoo Finance. Rick, thanks. Have a good Monday.
Sure thing. See ya.
You can keep up with the latest headlines right here on abcnews.com. You've been watching The Big Number. I'm Dan Kleffler in New York.